If you're not a person of faith, please use these few moments to think and reflect in your own way. Let's pray. Creator God, as John chairs this important meeting this morning, called at short notice, we thank you for everyone who has been able to rearrange their busy schedules to be here this morning. As this council considers its responsibility to the planet and to future generations, and also considers getting ready to embrace the new reality of what daily work will look like in a post-COVID world, we pray for great wisdom and insight for both officers and councillors alike, that they may be of one mind on these matters and reach complete agreement, united in their vision for the future. Help them together to discern what is good and helpful and right. Creator God, your word tells us that the natural world is groaning, longing for a cleaner, better day to come, and that all good work is pleasing to you in and of itself. Forgive us for the ways in which our work has caused damage and not repair. Help us all to work in such a way that both the planet, the whole community, and even family life are given the space to breathe and to thrive, to be restored and made new. We thank you for hearing our prayers, feeding us with your word, and encouraging us in our meeting together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mark. I see that we are live streaming now on YouTube. Beth, could you carry the roll call, please?
Councillor Austin. Councillor Bradford.
Present.
Councillor Bullivant. Councillor Clarence.
Present.
Councillor Colclough. Councillor Connett.
Present.
Councillor David Cox. Councillor Hugh Cox.
Present.
Councillor Dawes.
He's on his way.
Thank you. Councillor Dewhurst.
Apologies, present.
Councillor Eden. Councillor Evans.
Present.
Councillor Foden.
Present.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury.
Present.
Councillor Gribble.
Present.
Councillor Haynes.
Present.
Councillor Hayes.
Present.
Councillor Hocking.
Present.
Councillor Gordon Hook.
Present.
Councillor Jackie Hook.
Present.
Councillor Jeffries.
Present.
Councillor Jenks.
Present.
Councillor Keeling.
Present.
Councillor Kerswell. Councillor McGregor. Councillor Morgan.
Present.
Councillor Malone.
Present.
Councillor Nutley.
Present.
Councillor Orme. Councillor Parker Khan.
Present.
Councillor Patch.
Present.
Councillor Peart. Councillor Linda Petherick.
Present.
Councillor Phipps.
Present.
Councillor Purser.
Present.
Councillor Rollison. Councillor Swain. Councillor Taylor.
Present.
Councillor Thorne.
Present.
Councillor Toome. Councillor Wrigley.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Present.
Councillor John Petherick.
Present. Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, I've had apologies from Councillor Nuttall, Jeffrey and Russell.
Okay, Thank you. Just going to go back one step now to meeting protocol, and this is something that I mentioned before every meeting, but this...
Chairman, I missed the roll call. I am present. Mary
Okay.
Colclough.
Thank you, Colclough. Thank Councillor Colclough. Thank you very much. Meeting protocol. Please, members, keep your microphone on mute if you are not speaking, and please keep the camera on during the actual meeting. If any of you wish to comment on the agenda item that we're going to hear today, then please raise your electronic hand and you will actually go into a queue, and I will be able to identify who the first in the queue is and so on. So that will be dealt with fairly. And if by any chance we do need to take a toilet break, a comfort break, then I think that would be about an hour and a half into the meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? I take that as a no. Item 3 on the agenda is Ford House Decarbonisation, an Agile Working Project. This is detailed on the agenda, pages 3 to 18 of the agenda. I'd like to ask now the member for climate change to move the recommendation, please.
Good morning, members. Thank you, Chair. I don't intend to go into the detail of the report before us, but myself and officers present are happy to take any questions on the detail of the report, which hopefully you found time to read. Rather, I just wanted to set the context for the two interlinked elements of this report. You'll remember that in April 2019, this council unanimously declared a climate emergency, and in so doing, it committed to doing all within its powers to ensure our council and the district was carbon neutral by 2025. I think we all recognise how immensely challenging that target is. There are so many aspects of the district's carbon footprint that are not within this council's direct sphere of influence, where we need to work with others to achieve carbon reduction, and many areas in which we need to lobby central government for better legislation. We are doing both of these. However, when we made our declaration and signed the Devon Climate Declaration, we committed to lead the fight within our district by addressing our own carbon emissions as an organisation. That would have been extremely difficult without having a dedicated qualified officer to take forward that work. And we have been very fortunate to have the services of Will Elliott, and Will joins us today. It is Will, together with a team of supporting officers at Teignbridge, who submitted the bids to the Public Sector Decarbonisation Fund earlier this year. We have already reported our success with the decarbonisation bid for our leisure centres, but recently we were also informed of our success with the bid relating to the decarbonising of Ford House. And I wanted to take the opportunity to thank Will and all those involved with putting the bid together and subsequently putting this report together, especially Andrea in finance. As we have seen before, the timescales with regards to some of these government funding bids are extremely challenging, and officers involved have pulled out all the stops to ensure that we can get back to the funders with the information and approval they require. The need for this extraordinary meeting today is because the funding administrators need us to achieve full council approval before we have the next scheduled full council meeting. This funding provides us with a fantastic opportunity to reduce the carbon emissions of Ford House by over 90%. The works are indicated in Appendix A and include the replacement of the gas-fired heating system with air source heat pumps, replacing the extract ventilation system, installing draft proofing, and installation of an insulated roof. In addition to these grant-funded works, more solar PV will be added to the building. As well as achieving carbon reductions, the council will see a large reduction in energy bills, amounting to over £7,000 per annum as a result of these works. Whilst the purpose of the bid funding was to decarbonise the building, it would have been remiss of us not to also consider other changes that could be made to the building at the same time, to take advantage of the scope for reducing the amount of office space occupied by the council, recognising the increase in home working that is likely to take place post-COVID. Considering agile working was also part of our climate declaration commitment, but COVID as a contributory influence on that means that it makes absolute sense to consider now adaptations to the building that can be made at the same time as the decarbonisation work to ensure not only efficient energy use and lower emissions, but how we can enable more flexible working spaces and take advantage of the release of some office space to rent out and create an income. I should add that since the report was produced last week, there has been ongoing work with AECOM, the contractors, on the detail of the agile working component of the works. The result is that costs have been reduced, such that a change in recommendation 2 has been included today. This has a lower borrowing needs figure, approximately £350,000 less in cost. So the new figure in recommendation 2, in replacement to the figure there of approximately 2.7 million, the new figure should read £2,368,031. So that's a good news story as a result of the ongoing work on the project. So I hope councillors will approve the 3 recommendations outlined in the report with the slightly amended recommendation 2, allowing us to get on with this work without delay. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Jackie Hook. Proposal from Councillor Hook. Would somebody like to second that proposal, please? Councillor Gary Taylor. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Sarah Parker-Khan.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions really about the proposal. Just a few details, first of all, if you would please. One is around whether staff have been consulted about agile working, obviously with the potential reduction of office space. Have they been asked, or any consultation being made around whether they want to have this flexi working model, and what the feedback was like? And my second question would be, obviously the ground floor currently is occupied by revenue and benefits, and that's where the public make their first point of call. Do we have the assurance that public will still be able to come and access in-person revenue and benefits at Ford House, or is it going to be located elsewhere?
Would somebody like to respond? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I wasn't sure if you were going to. Yeah, I will pass that over to Neil or the appropriate officer. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm very happy to second this proposal. I think it's really certainly something that I've been very keen that we do at Ford House since this new administration came to power 2 years ago. We need to invest these funds so that we can reduce the carbon footprint of Ford House as soon as possible, rather than wait for things to wear out. Although as I understand it, the gas boiler is worn out and due to need replacement. Having taken this difficult step myself in a much more modest way, to be honest, I don't think that we would look back as an authority with any regrets at all about going all electric. It gives us so much more flexibility in terms of our heating and cooling, which is needed in our office spaces now. Welcome to the £350,000 reduction in additional funding that's required, and I think it's quite an exciting proposal regarding the agile working and how we can make Ford House that much more efficient for the benefit of our taxpayers. Let's face it, at the end of the day, the local taxpayers who ultimately fund the running of Ford House, and I think they would be pleased to see that we are managing their funding in a responsible way, both in terms of the environment and in terms of the funding. So I fully support it. I also agree with Sarah, Councillor Parker-Khan, regarding the accessibility. It would be good to understand how that will be taking place, and I look forward to hearing the officers' report on that.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Before I invite the next member to speak, just for clarification, please, from Democratic Services, I noticed that a member has joined us shortly after the agenda item actually started. So am I correct in assuming that that member will not be able to vote, but will be able to comment on the agenda item?
You just had the introductions, Chair. It would be up to the member to decide whether he's had felt that he's listened to the debate enough.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, Chair, I did join the meeting after the beginning of the meeting, but before this agenda item. Are you talking about me?
I wasn't actually.
Okay, my apologies. I am here and was here for the beginning.
Right, you are. I just thought I would clarify that one. Okay, the next
Chairman,
member...
excuse me, I wasn't here for the roll call, but I was here for the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr, as well. Nobody else? Councillor Dawes.
I'm assuming you were talking about me, and I was here for the, not the roll call, but the start of the agenda item.
No, I wasn't actually, Councillor Dawes. No, but carry on, please.
Okay, so I'd wholeheartedly support anything that the council does to reduce its carbon impact, and I think it's a small step in the right direction. What I would like us to do is think on a much bigger scale and think a lot more creatively. We're facing the biggest existential crisis that humankind's ever faced. So this might sort of scratch the surface. What I'd like the council to commit to doing in the future is to actually look at the need for so many in-person meetings. I know we're going to be told that government dictate that should be done, but we should at least have an impact study of all the travel that is done unnecessarily in lots of cases. Lots of members don't turn up and don't even speak at meetings. I think the crisis has shown us that there is a great utility in using technology that can have a massive impact on our carbon footprint as a council. And then more overarchingly, I think that we can show a lead by demonstrating that having the utility of a huge space in the centre of a town, maybe we could have some more creative thinking of what we do with that. And if that's multiplied across the country, it would have a huge impact. I'll throw in one great suggestion. Perhaps we could book council meetings into the newly refurbished Grade 2 listed Alexander Theatre when that project eventually goes in the right direction. So I will lend my support to this motion, and I'd like the council to commit to go an awful lot further in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawes. Councillor Hocking.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a very simple question. We have in the report the amount of borrowing that the council is going to do, and it states that you hope to provide a minimum of 1% return on our investment. Does that include the money, the interest that we have to pay on the borrowing, or will that come out after the 1% return? Thank you.
Would somebody like to field that question, please?
Can I just make a few comments, and I'm sure
Please
officers
do.
would want to join in. The answer to Mike's question, I believe, is yes, but we'll get past the finance in a minute. But I just wanted to agree absolutely with the comments from Councillor Dawes. We should be looking to maximise the use of technology for virtual meetings. I'm sure most of us would agree with that. I certainly have found virtual meetings a much more efficient way and use of my time, and I'm sure a lot of us don't want the travel involved in going to meetings. So even if we can't hold council meetings virtually, I hope we will continue to maximise as many numbers of meetings as we can, other meetings held virtually, and get the technological capability to do that. So certainly agree with that one. Can I pass to I think there was 3 sets of questions: Sarah's questions, Richard Dawes' questions, and Mike Hawkins. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Malone.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I thought we were going to go to the officers.
That was my understanding, but there wasn't a response. But carry, yeah, please do. Yeah.
Neil or somebody?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I was waiting for the pause. So I'll pick up Councillor Parker Khan's questions. Obviously, the staff, the majority of staff have been working from home since March last year, and there's been ongoing discussions initially about the return to the office and having a COVID secure workplace to make sure there was no more than 50% occupancy. And as part of that, we've been looking at the balance of working from home and working within the office for those who need to come in. So some of these discussions looking at agile working is based on those themes and those approaches, and there's been ongoing discussion with staff to understand how that's working for them, what improvements need to be made to improve working from home, because it's obviously initially it was a reaction to what we needed to do, and people have made do, but obviously there needs to be a permanent solution. It needs to have a lot more investment and thought into that. So those discussions have been ongoing, and subject to the funding being agreed, more detailed work will be done on the planning, but there is ongoing discussions now with all staff about what the needs are, what the service requirements are, as well as the personal needs, and that will continue as the project moves forward. So the staff are engaged in this work. And your other question related to the ground floor accessibility for revenue and benefits, and my understanding is it will still be accessible. How it works will be part of the design process, again subject to funding being agreed and the project being developed further as to how best to provide those services. So it's a to be continued answer really on that one. For Councillor Dawes' question, was that on the reducing the need to travel unnecessarily side of it? Can I just get clarification, please?
Councillor Dawes is shaking his head in agreement.
Yes, nodding my head. Yes.
No, sorry, nodding.
Yeah.
Yes.
Obviously, virtual meetings will require legislation from government. The last legislation's run out and they didn't renew it, so obviously you have to go back to in-person meetings. I think there's been a lot of support for virtual meetings and the benefits they've brought in a lot of ways. So that's something that we'll need to obviously lobby towards if we want to see that change, and looking at alternative uses for buildings, and it is something that we'll always continue to do, of what opportunities we can make to reduce travel. We're looking in-house at how we deal with that and reducing the need to travel, and as initiatives come along and opportunities arise, that's certainly something we'll continue to push. I think the final question is probably if I can pass over to Martin on the finance question, if that's okay, Martin.
Yep, happy to answer that one. So in relation to Councillor Mike Hocking's question, the 1% return is after paying any interest on any loans that we have to take out, and it's also after any repayments of capital as well, so it covers repayment of capital costs as well. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. Councillor Malone.
Thank you. Councillor Hook's presentation points to a yearly saving of energy costs of £7,000 per year. Forgive me because I'm clearly comparing apples to oranges slightly, but if a normal person were to try and make their own house carbon neutral, then even with a sort of belt and braces approach, they could expect to recoup the money for those improvements in about 15 to 20 years. Now this figure, even with the new figure and even subtracting the grant funding, we're looking at recovering the cost of doing this in about 320 years. Can we explain why why it would take such an enormous time to recoup the savings? I mean, obviously we'll never recoup the savings. What is the reason why the price tag on this is so large, please? Thank you.
Neil, could you respond to that one, please?
I'll defer to either Will or Martin on that one, if that's okay.
Yes, so there are two main sort of income streams that we'll achieve from these decarbonisation works, and those are the energy savings that you pointed out, Councillor Malone, but also there's the intention to develop a new income stream from renting out part of the ground floor to a tenant. So that will increase the rate of return on the project. The reason for why the payback, I don't believe, be quite as long as you raised there, but the reason for why that payback is so long is simply because there's just a number of investments that we need to make into the building to make it ready for low carbon technologies. So currently the building just isn't geared up for the type of heating system that we want to put in, as we've had to make our own further contributions in order to make that system ready. So examples include installing a new electricity supply system to the building, so superseding our existing supply and installing an uprated system that can supply enough energy and power to that new air source heat pump that we connected to the electricity grid. We'd also have to install suspended ceilings because the heat will be provided into the building at ceiling level through sort of blow fan cassette units and that sort of thing. And there's a whole host of works that we need to do to get this building ready, future-proof and decarbonised.
Thank you.
Can I just add some comments to that as well? So in terms of the running costs for Ford House, we also benefit by reducing our business rates bill and some of the other recharges that we make. So that does add to the return that we make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Purser.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I fully endorse these proposals and also very much endorse Councillor Dawes' suggestions about virtual meetings. It does make life a lot easier and does save an awful lot of carbon in terms of travel. My question is around the rental out of the ground floor. I just wonder, could we understand what work has been done to assess what the likely demand is for that space when it's made available? And do we have likely tenants lined up, or is that very much in the future still?
Would somebody like to respond to Councillor Purser, please?
Yeah, sure. I'll make a start, and then Steve Forsey's on the call if he wants to add anything further that I've missed, then he can do so. So we haven't got any tenants lined up right now. We've obviously got other units around that we've got office space. We know where the likely demand is going to be. So we've looked at potential income generation based on comparable costs elsewhere, and that's in the report about what would happen if we charged a high level, medium level, or lower level, or no rental received for a set period of time, to see what's feasible and what's realistic, and therefore what impact that has on the income coming back in. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty around a lot of elements of the rental market at the moment. As lockdown restrictions start to ease, some businesses said they weren't going to have office space anymore. There is still some demand out there for businesses that are looking to maybe consolidate what they've got, so they might have quite a bit of office space and needing to downsize to other areas. There are some public sector bodies that are looking at alternative spaces at the moment. So there's different lines of inquiry. We don't have anything concrete to give you now to say this is who's going to be moving in. That work would carry on subject to funding being agreed. If members sign this off today, then the work will carry on to secure tenants and understand what their needs would be for the space available. Steve, is there anything I've missed on that? Sorry.
Thank you, Neil.
No, I think you've picked that up. Thank you, Neil. Just as Neil was saying, basically, we will make further inquiries with public sector partners that we have, but also as a fallback position, clearly there are elements of the ground floor that could be suited to small businesses as well. So those lines of inquiry will be made at a later date.
Thank you. Councillor Patch.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up Councillor Parker-Khan's question, which left a few, or rather the response to which left a few questions hanging in my mind. Firstly, have staff been formally presented with plans or procedures or ideas for future home working with a view to getting their feedback or views on that, and sort of formally presented with proposals? And if so, what percentage of staff have expressed an interest in working from home in the future? My concerns are mainly that, well, a number of concerns really, that while during the sort of coronavirus panic, then lots of staff have either been forced or rather would have been quite happy to work at home. But with restrictions being lifted, I think for a lot of employees, then actually being in an office environment and interacting with colleagues, the social aspect of that is very important. And I think many staff I can see may be feeling a bit isolated if they feel they're pressured to having to work from home. So I'd like to know if there has been some formal consultation on staff's views, and if so, what percentage of staff were in favour of these proposals?
Thank you, Councillor Patch. Would the officers like to respond, please?
Yeah, so in terms of a formal plan for what will happen, not specifically. There's been plans, actual floor plans of how desks may be spread out. I mentioned earlier about the percentage of time people are in the office. So those conversations have been happening over quite a few months on how these things might work, understanding what the needs of the service are and how people are working. We are incredibly mindful of the impacts on isolation on staff's mental well-being and you know, making sure that there is not just the contact, but also where possible. Obviously, kind of face-to-face, there's been quite a lot of restrictions on what we can do, but we are very mindful of the need for a lot of interaction in person, that creative element, especially when you're starting on projects and working and support. So that has been an integral part of our work over the last year, is supporting staff and making sure that no one's being pressured into doing these, making these changes. It's looking at what works well. For some staff, they have more, I guess, needs than others in terms of the way what work they're focusing on, how much they need to interact with others. So it's an ongoing engagement process. So it's not being railroaded through for anybody. There is ongoing conversation and looking at what the best fit is all round.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chair. If you can hear, we've got building work going on, so if you can hear any noise, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I apologise for that. It seems to me that we're depending on the rental of the office space to pay back a loan of some £2.6 million. Is that the only income stream we've got to pay back this money? Is that what we are depending on? Because I'm a little bit concerned of the viability of that. And I'd like to thank Councillor Malone for putting the other questions forward and Councillor Parr, so they stole my thunder a little bit. But yeah, I'm just a bit concerned about the paying back this £2.6 million.
Thank you. Martin, would you like to respond, please?
Yes, so the rental income is the major stream of income that we get on this project. So it is very much dependent on that. But we have a considerable amount of time from project start to finish to identify a tenant. So time will tell us as to whether we get a tenant or not. We feel that there's going to be someone out there that will want to rent part or all of that space. So we're fairly confident on that. If we get to a position where we can't rent it out, then at that point we may have to use further capital receipts to fund the difference. But that's the position as we are at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. Councillor Jackie Hook.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to round up in the end when people have finished.
Okay.
Really, so if there's still others.
There are actually, and so we're coming back for a second question. Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also to all involved for this project, for all the work that's gone into it. I have a small question. I'm looking at the page 13, the predicted carbon emission trajectory for Ford House. And I can see that the gas consumption is expected to drop right off, obviously, by replacing that with an air source heat pump. But I can't see on this graph where, obviously, the air source heat pump is much more efficient, but it does still use some electricity. So we would expect the electricity consumption to go up, and I can't quite see where that is. It does say increase in electricity consumption for heating offset by energy efficiency measures and the solar PV, which also leads me to a question, because is the solar PV sufficient to power the heating system, and in which case there's going to be surplus a lot of the time. But as I understand it currently, there's a problem that where you generate surplus PV, you export it to the grid, but you don't get paid for it, which is quite a major problem with national policy that really needs to be fixed on an urgent basis. Are we expecting to be exporting electricity for free? Are we installing batteries? Can we get any more information on that? I also wanted to mention, Councillor Malone, that was a very good question about the payback period. But as I understand the report, the existing gas heating system needs replacing anyway. So presumably it's a choice between this scheme or spending a lot more money on the old system. It's not a choice between this scheme and not spending any money at all. Is that correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. I guess that the Climate Change Officer would like to respond to your questions.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Swain. So I think you're right to point out that the graph doesn't appear to show much of an increase in electricity consumption. So that graph is showing the carbon emissions from Ford House. So the emissions factors that have been applied to each energy source in that graph, they do sort of disguise what's happening underneath the surface. So you are correct in that, well, the gas consumption will drop off entirely. And we will see a net increase in electricity consumption as a result of connecting the heat pump. But what we've taken into account is a number of electricity offsets associated with the installation of the heat pump. So there are two major areas where we can save electricity, and that's the first being would be that we would remove all of the auxiliary loads that's associated with pumping the hot water to all the hot water radiators around the building. So that's a fairly substantial source of energy savings. And then the second major source of energy savings is, if you're familiar with the second floor at Ford House, there are a number of split air conditioning units installed in various offices. So these units, they're largely quite old units and they're operating at quite an inefficient level. So once we deinstall those systems and supersede them with this much more energy efficient heat pump, then we'll get some additional energy savings from that. So hopefully that answers your questions about the emissions trajectory. For solar PV, if we were to consider the net increase in energy consumption as a result of installing the air source heat pump, the solar PV system should entirely offset that increase in electricity consumption on an annual basis. And then through investigation of our existing and historical half-hourly electricity consumption, we believe that we should be able to capture the vast majority, let's say upwards of 90% of that electricity generation, because our current electricity demand is high enough to absorb that level of PV generation.
Thank you.
So there shouldn't be the issue of export to the grid.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Petherick.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have declared a climate emergency, so I do think we need to practice what we preach. But I also think it's really important to keep the public informed in what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because on the one hand, we're telling them that we've got a deficit, and then on the other hand, we're saying that we're going to borrow some money to get this work done. So I think it's really important about communication to the public about why we're doing it and where we're getting the money from. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that three members have returned for a second question. Councillor Parker Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with what the last speaker, Councillor Linda Petherick, said, is that we have to keep the public informed. And I don't think there's anybody here who wouldn't agree that making the buildings more efficient and decarbonising isn't a good thing. However, our role is to ensure that the proposals being put forward are the best proposals. And I just wanted to ask two questions again. One was whether other alternative green means of technology for heating the building had been explored, and why they'd been discounted. I was thinking about biomass boilers and things like that, and whether they would be as efficient or less costly. And also, I noted that the government funding of, I think it was 672,000, was contingent on particular timescales, and we're looking likely not to meet those timescales, and extensions have been requested. I want to know what happens if we can't meet the deadlines, even if it is June 22, and we have to give the money back, is the intention that the council will still pursue this course of action and will fund from elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker-Khan. I guess that the Climate Change Officer will be the first one to respond to one of your questions at least.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So we did consider other low carbon alternatives. Biomass, there wasn't actually grant funding available for a biomass solution. So our hand was forced choosing between air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. And in the end, we sided with an air source heat pump, just because we're able to get sort of more bang for our buck from that grant funding. Biomass, we've explored that option in the past as well, but given that this is an office building and it doesn't have a significant year-long demand, that it means that this technology doesn't lend itself quite so well to this site. So biomass works really well where you have a continual demand for heat. Biomass heating systems are very much heat-driven systems. So one classic example is the biomass heating system at Dawlish. That site has a continual year-round demand for heat. And so it just means that system stacks up, especially when you couple that with a renewable heat incentive. So unfortunately, that scheme is no longer available, and we simply have to rely on grant funding as it becomes available. In terms of project timescales, so yes, our timescales have exceeded the September 2021 deadline, but we've been in regular communication with Salix, the grant awarding body, and they have said themselves they're cautiously optimistic that they will be able to grant us a full extension once the decision comes through from central government. They have also reported that other councils are in the same boat that we are, but it does seem very optimistic that we will get that extension. I think what's key to the authority to de-risk the potential for grant funding to be removed is to spend as much of that grant funding as possible ahead of the deadline. And we're going about this by going down a route of a two-stage project delivery process, whereby we appoint a main contractor early for the project, and we place early orders on the main equipment items. So this helps to accelerate our spend. We are endeavouring also to accelerate the delivery of those projects as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malone.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm grateful for all the explanations, and I'm as keen as anyone to have low carbon buildings. I just wonder about the value for money for the taxpayer ultimately, because I just wondered, looking at this price tag of over £3 million, has it been considered that we might be, now that we're in the frame of mind of doing things remotely, has it at least been considered that maybe we should just knock the whole thing down and start again? Because it's not an attractive building, it's not an efficient building, it doesn't have any sympathy to the very important old building next to it. Why not start again for this kind of price tag and have something that is zero carbon and is tailor-made for both the council and the rental possibilities? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Malone. I'm sure that's an option that's being considered. Would one of the officers like to respond, please?
I'm not aware that we've considered the option of just knocking it down and starting again. So I couldn't give you a cost, but it would be, I mean, this site is a former landfill site, so there's a lot of remediation work as a starting point, along with all the other costs of demolition and replacement building. So I don't have an answer to say what the alternative cost would be, but it's not an option before us.
And you would also have to relocate as well during the process, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then perhaps just to add to that, I think we also need to consider the embodied emissions of the building. So if we were to scrap the building, we've got the emissions associated with demolishing the building, transporting waste off site, and then bringing new materials onto site to develop a whole new building. I just think that we need to take a more broader view on those emissions. We can't just think about the operational emissions. We need to think about the emissions that's associated with the construction of the building as well.
Thank you. Councillor Patch.
Thank you, Chair. I am concerned that staff have not been formally consulted on the plan for working from home in the future, and I'm trying to reconcile that in my mind with the view that no one is being pressured. Given that if we do lose lots of space previously used by staff in the building, and the majority of staff, or the vast majority, do want to come back and work in the environment of Forward House, then someone will inevitably be pressured. I just do wonder in my mind's eye whether it's we might have the situation where not only are we not able to attract someone to hire the extra space that's freed up, but we might have staff who do not want to work from home, and might we actually end up allowing those staff to come in and work in the space which we'd previously planned to let out, in a sort of rather sort of counterproductive move. And in terms of the overall proposals, is it possible for us to split out the upgrading of the heating system from the proposed changes in working practices and layout of Forward House? Because I would think, whereas I think the majority of us would agree that there's a need and a benefit in upgrading the heating system, I think some more time might be spent on thinking through plans to sort of rework the use of this space and the idea of staff working from home. I don't think we've got a firm view on how that might pan out in terms of what staff would like to do in the future. So would it be possible to take these proposals separately?
I'm not sure about that, Councillor Patch. I'll need some guidance on that one. Head of Place, would you like to respond, please? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the agile working bit, I answered the question about have they been consulted on specific proposals before them. We're getting to that point. There has been discussions with staff for the last year about agile working, and discussions about what's going to happen going forward. On the whole, I mean, staff have been engaged throughout the last year on agile working as a concept, and on the whole, it's been very positive. And even with the return to the office, which we started August, September last year, after the first lockdown had ended and people started to come back and government guidance started to change on when people couldn't come back. And on the whole, that split of working from home and working in the office was viewed positively. So I don't see, I appreciate the points Councillor Patch is making. The staff are engaged with the work. The consultation will go on the detail once we've got more certainty about what is being what we can propose, because obviously a lot of this depends on the funding being secured. And taking the earlier the following point about can we separate the agile working from the funding as a whole? Not really. This relies. We've mentioned we're reliant upon the rental income from the ground floor. We are looking at different ways of working and making sure we make the best use of this building. Picking up on an earlier point, reducing the need to travel is something that we will continue to look at, and some of that is the commute to work. So the proposals are taken as a whole for this. There are interdependencies between the agile working and the decarbonisation elements. It's not easily split. I don't know if anyone else wants to add a comment. I think Phil wants to come in.
Councillor Patch, you also mentioned something about the heating as well. Would the Climate Change Officer like to respond to that one? You had a query about the heating as well, efficiency.
Sorry, would you mind just relaying that question again, Councillor Patch?
I don't recall making a question about the efficiency of the heating, to be honest.
Sorry, you mentioned the heating. I'm sorry, my mistake. So we'll move on then. So, Councillor Dawes.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the point raised by Councillor Malone, actually, because I think it's a good one in terms of the long-term plans. I had direct experience myself of trying to retrofit a 1930s house and did everything I possibly could in terms of installing a biomass boiler, mechanical ventilation, heat recovery system, and all sorts of insulation. What I probably should have done is knock the house down and rebuild it, because I would have had a much lower impact by doing that ongoing. And with all my best will in the world, by not doing that, I've created a greater impact. Because retrofitting is very difficult. So if you tie that into the trying to put a band-aid over a pre-existing building, alongside the fact that the district authority is a landowner in the middle of town, we have a huge housing crisis. We have land. We're trying to bring forward landowners to satisfy developers, and it's only farmers seemingly who can satisfy that. There's an awful lot of land around Ford House that has no utility at all. I'm one of the few people who runs through the front lawn. I never see any members of the public on it. And I just think there should be some blue sky thinking before we commit to this huge commitment, which clearly has no economic viability to it. It's because there's a grant there. And quite often this council seems to be driven because there's a grant there. Rather than by doing the actual right things. So I'd like a little bit more introspection in this before we commit to it. So in fact, I'm now changing my position on backing the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawes. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, yes, I think Councillor Dawes is slightly veering off subject here. But in terms of economically viable, I think we've seen how we can make Ford House more economically viable. As regard to demolition, I think that's an argument that's reeled out quite often, forgetting, of course, in fact, the embedded energy in a building. It would be many years in the future where any increased saving through demolition and starting from scratch would be better than actually retrofitting. So I think for the budget that we have and for the immediate impact that we can have on the environment, and I think that's something that we should think very, very carefully about to move forward as per this proposal, I think is the right way. Thank you.
Just as I thought we were bringing this matter to a close, I see that a flurry of hands have gone up. Councillor Bullivant.
Thank you. Listening to the comments from Councillor Dawes and Councillor Malone, I think they make some interesting points. And you look at the payback that Councillor Malone related to, which is over 100 years on this investment. And that's a very interesting and valid point. Particularly as that building, as we all know, as we visited, is in quite a poor state. And I think the point that Councillor Dawes makes about replacing it is something that really should be considered. I think spending £3.5 million as a project is something that the council could afford to do, but it should be spent in the right way. So I endorse what Councillors Malone and Dawes have said. Thank you.
Thank you. Two more blue hands, so I'll go to the leader first. I see Councillor McGregor's put his hand up now. So leader, would you like to comment, please?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful to everyone for all of the various comments. It strikes me that the council knows it needs to replace the gas boiler, and so we could just simply replace the gas boiler, least cost, least change, but something has to be done. So doing nothing isn't an option, as I understand it, because the boiler is at the end of its useful or economic life. Consequently, officers have seen an opportunity to win a government grant or a grant which would enable us to do something which would reduce the carbon, which is a council commitment, a council endeavour, which would be better than a new gas boiler, hence the £670,000. We'll put some money to it to make that work as well. And then separate to that, and learning from everything that we've had in the past year or so because of the pandemic and lockdown, is to modernise the building to facilitate agile working. And Councillor Patch has rightly said, well, will staff want to do that? Well, before pandemic, I think a lot of staff would have asked for time away from the office if they thought we could do it. And what the pandemic has done is effectively fast forwarded the IT that enables that. And I think a lot more people are seeing the opportunities of that flexible working, where you spend some days in the week in the office and some days working from home. And not that I have direct experience in it, but through other colleagues and other councils, I'm hearing of staff who, whereas they didn't apply for a job at the council, say some distance away because they've had to relocate, what they're effectively doing are working for other councils, but staying in their own house because they're working remotely and then going to their new council, some distance away, occasionally for team meetings. And away from local government, I have a friend who lives in Cornwall who is working for Forestry England in Bristol doing GDPR data. And the thing that's happened over the past year or so, in my view, is that that new style of working has become more real for people, for members of staff who are seeing the opportunity. So I'm glad that Neil Blaney explained that we have been talking to our staff closely. There hasn't been a formal consultation, but that is an ongoing process. And I think that demonstrates the way I would have expected it, which shouldn't be a surprise to staff. And I can hear what people say about, well, shall we just knock down the building and start again? It's not the most fabulous building to have next door to a Grade 1 listed, and we can all look at planners of the day, as in members who made the decision and all the rest of it. But we also hear from colleagues about what that site is and the cost of demolishing it. Pardon me, the cost of demolishing it. So I think really the choices, it seems to me, as a ward councillor, are simply, do we just replace the gas boiler, have done, carry on? Or do we take the opportunity that's before us now to hit some of our climate change targets and make the council fit for future in terms of agile working and what that may offer, not just our current staff, but the people we're looking to attract who may, for example, want to work for Teambridge because we only require someone to be in the office 2 days a week and working from home 3 days a week, and that suits their lifestyle as well. And I think that's the way lots of big organisations are going, Chairman. So that's all I particularly wanted to say, and I'm grateful for the very good debate we're having on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for being late to the meeting. I think I've had a surf of fresh air in the last few days, and it's basically got to me. But the points that I wanted to kind of cover really are that, first of all, Ford House itself, as we were probably all aware, perhaps unconsciously, was developing big swathes of open space within the office. And I think this is a great opportunity for Teambridge to actually consolidate its staffing onto floors in an organised way and create the space that it needs to so that it can rent it out. And this is a great opportunity to do that. So, from the perspective of looking beyond also the heating system, this also includes the air conditioning system, which is elderly as well, and probably will require replacement at some point in the near future, which is a further cost anyway. So we're looking to get all of those things done within this project. So we're creating a working space for people together so that people aren't isolated even within the building. We're creating a better working condition for people, and that's an improvement. And we're giving people the option to work from home as well, where they are able to and feel it's appropriate for them. So all of those things considered, I think that's actually quite a valuable way forward. Yes, the financing looks like a long-term investment and a long-term recovery in terms of the funds coming back in. But as a package of work for all 4 sites that have been part of the decarbonisation, the actual carbon impact for the council is phenomenal. It's a huge tick for us as an authority in terms of the amount of carbon reduction that will result from all 4 projects going forward. And I think that really fits in well with our policies on climate change. And I think going forward, again, we should be looking to find further ways to reduce that. On the last point, and this is a point raised by Councillor Dawes, and I do appreciate that it is a big, nice open space, but it's one of the most beautiful open spaces in that part of Newton Abbot, Old Ford House Lawn. It's also a grade 1 listed property. And I think at this stage nowadays, to try and build around that would potentially risk that building. And we are in a situation, of course, where we are valuing grade 1 and grade 2 listed buildings in very different ways by looking at it in that respect. And I think retaining the lawn that you can see from Brunel Road right up to Old Fort House, it's an absolutely beautiful view, and you can't really appreciate it when you're driving a car because you've got focus on the traffic, but if you're walking up that pavement, it is absolutely fantastic. And that's all I'd like to say, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor, I know that you've had your hand raised for some time, but there are 2 other members that would like to speak, and I guess that you'll sum up at the end. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So, Councillor Bullivant.
Sorry, I had meant to say previously, an important thing when looking at the working arrangements within Ford House, it's important that we remember that the people there have to have the best working environments that we can provide. But I'm concerned that over the last year, the deterioration in the level of service that we've had, the support that we've seen, the difficulty in contacting officers, the difficulty in getting responses to emails, the difficulties in getting access to people at the appropriate time has been manifest and delayed a lot of the things that we as councillors should be doing. So the focus should be, I think, towards looking at how we provide the best level of service to the residents of Teignbridge and support that with the appropriate conditions for staff. And I'd like to have the assurance that when we're looking at staff working arrangements, we're bearing in mind our focus should be towards the levels of service as well as the environment that we provide for the staff to work in. And I'm not happy that we've addressed that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bullivant. I know that Councillor Hook will sum up at the end, and I'm sure that she will embrace some of your concerns when she sums up. Councillor Patch.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just also like to thank the leader for his useful and helpful comments. But just by way of clarification, I'm not at all opposed to, in principle, to the changing of the layout of Ford House. And I think we'd all appreciate the world of work has changed, and it will be very different moving forward. And some element of flexible working from home is inevitable. My concern is about the pressing forward with what will be a very expensive operation when we haven't had the full consultation with staff to see what appetite there might be for this. I'll use the phrase agile working, although I'm not particularly fond of it. I think we should say what it is. It's an element of working from home with other flexibility built in. We're not sure exactly what the demand will be, and I'm not convinced. Well, or rather, I'll say I'm not convinced. I'll say I am convinced that maybe better value for money might be achieved if we were to spend some time thinking about this and come back in a sort of month or two, having looked at what appetite there might be for staff and what the full range of options might be for Ford House.
Thank you, Councillor Patch. Councillor Jackie Hook, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for wide-ranging, detailed questions. That's been a useful debate. I think I'd like members probably to remember and focus on what this project is about. So the 2 elements: one, reducing carbon emissions, and just to remind you that elements of this were already in our capital programme. So elements of this money were already in our capital programme approved earlier this year. And both elements, including agile working, will be in our emerging carbon action plan. And my mention of the £7,000 per annum saving in energy bills wasn't meant as the driver of this. Obviously, that was an additional bonus to the project beyond its 2 main aims: reducing carbon emissions and enabling agile working. Thank you for the comments on staff welfare consultation and obviously the efficient running of the council. All of these paramount considerations and must be taken into account going forwards. And yes, really important that we keep the public informed, especially because this is partly about us leading the way and providing an example of what can be done. I hope after a very long debate that members will approve the 3 recommendations as per the report, with the amended figure in recommendation 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. So we have a proposal from Councillor Jackie Hook, which has been seconded by Councillor Taylor. Can we go to the vote, please?
Chair, before we go to the vote, could
Yes.
Councillor Hook just reiterate the amendment of the sum, just in case any members weren't 100% sure of the sum of the amendment?
But that's been reduced, isn't it? So that's good news.
Yeah. Okay, so in recommendation 2, where the figure currently reads 2,721,679,
Yeah.
the new figure would be £2,368,031, approximate reduction of £350,000 in terms of borrowing requirement.
Excellent news. So can we go to the vote, please?
Councillor Bradford.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Abstain.
Councillor Bullivant.
My computer wasn't working at the start of the meeting, so I didn't hear the start. So in that case, I must abstain.
Councillor Clarence.
For.
Councillor Colclough.
For.
Councillor Connett.
For.
Councillor Hugh Cox.
For.
Councillor Dawes.
I'll abstain.
Councillor Dewhurst.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Foden.
For.
Councillor Goodman Bradbury.
For.
Councillor Gribble.
For.
Councillor Haynes.
For.
Councillor Hayes. Councillor Hocking.
For.
Councillor Gordon Hook.
For.
Councillor Jackie Hook.
For.
Councillor Jeffries.
For.
Councillor Jenks.
For.
Councillor Keeling.
For.
Councillor Kerswell.
For.
Councillor McGregor.
Like Councillor Bullivant, I missed the start of the meeting, so I'll abstain. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Malone.
With deep reservations for.
Councillor Nutley.
For.
Councillor Parker Khan.
For.
Councillor Patch.
Against.
Councillor Linda Petherick.
For.
Councillor Phipps.
Against.
Councillor Purser.
For.
Councillor Rollison.
Chairman, apologies for missing the first part of the meeting, so I have to abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Rollison.
Councillor Swain.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Toom. Councillor Wrigley.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Oh, apologies, I believe I missed Councillor Thorne.
You did, yes, that's right. I'm against.
Thank you. And Councillor John Petherick.
For.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you for that. Members, that sort of virtually concludes our meeting for today, but I just need to advise you that our next meeting, which is the annual council meeting, will be held on the 28th of May at 10 a.m. at Newton Abbot Racecourse. Further details will be advised via the members' newsletter in due course. Look forward to seeing you all on the 28th of May. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.